Yes, hello, and welcome to the latest edition of the Total Saints podcast. This is our weekly get-together where we discuss all things relating to Southampton Football Club. Of course, we're live streaming our podcast on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. So if you're watching along on Sunday evening, you can leave your comments and your questions as we go. As always, a massive thank you to our TSP patrons who make all of this possible. You can visit patreon.com/Total Saints podcast to find out more about getting involved. Coming up this week on the pod, the post-match comments of manager Nathan Jones have been making the headlines today. There's plenty for us to pick over. Before that, there was a game and the result was depressingly predictable. We'll analyse the Brentford defeat. It seems like an age ago now, but there was also a League Cup semi-final second leg last week. The fans were in fine voice at Newcastle, but we didn't get a performance to match. The transfer window closed as well. A couple of big money additions, but are we any closer to knowing what our best 11 is? And the key games keep on coming. We're going to preview the visit of Wolves to St Mary's this weekend. My name's Martin Starke, and I'm joined this week by Steve Grant, who's the owner of SaintsWeb. Glen de Cour is the writer of the blog League 1-10, and Jacob Tanswell covers Southampton for The Athletic. All underpinned by our TSP patrons. Statistically, there's no one better in Europe. This is episode 220 of the Total Saints podcast. And the travelling fans made their opinions known at the final whistle yesterday. Choruses of Nathan Jones, get out of our club was one of the many chants, probably the only one we can mention on a family-friendly podcast. But it was the post-match comments from the manager that caused the most raised eyebrows afterwards. Jacob, you were there. You were in that press conference. Could you believe what the manager was saying and what the headlines that followed?
Yeah, I can actually. So basically, what happens is that the written media guys are the last ones to speak to the manager. So you get all these quotes coming in anyway from Adam Blackmore through the other broadcast guys, and Paul Balverstone had obviously tweeted out the quotes from Nathan. So I saw them on Twitter, and I thought, right, I need to expand on that. I need to ask him what he means. And I'm always the one that opens up the floor, basically. So I asked the first 3 or 4 questions. So it was important that we set the tone straight away. And usually I offer a half-hearted question where he can just talk about anything he wants. But yesterday I went straight in and asked him what he meant by compromising. He was on a roll and he gave a lot of answers that hit the headlines. And unfortunately, I had to change my whole piece. So it's fantastic from an entertainment point of view, but from a supporter's point of view, it's pretty irate, isn't it, at the moment, because it's only going to fuel the fire, isn't it?
It's a desperate situation. If you haven't seen it, it's worth reading the transcript and some of the articles around it. The compromise you're talking about there. He said, I've compromised in terms of principles and personnel. I've compromised because of fans and so on. It's a few little things, but I've been successful playing a fluent style. Steve, what was your take on it all yesterday?
Oh, just garbage. The game was the game, and I think, if you've got something kind of a little bit with a little bit of oomph up front, I think you possibly even get something from that game, weirdly.
Yeah.
But just the nonsense at full time is just, that is basically the straw that is going to break the camel's back, surely. When you're calling out basically, pretty much everyone apart from his closest family, as being responsible for the situation we find ourselves in, apart from him, then you're kind of in last chance saloon. And not even, it shouldn't even be last chance saloon. It should be a case of, right, you're mental. Let's just get this done and get it over with and spare everyone the grief of any future pain. But of course, we're probably going to roll with it, aren't we? Because that's what we do. We're whether it's Ankerson, whether it's Kraft, whether it's Solak who's taken the decision. Let's be honest, it's probably Ankerson who took the decision to appoint him in the first place. People like that don't tend to admit their mistakes very readily. And we're going to be in that situation where it's a case of, when does he blink? When does he decide to actually hold his hands up and say, yeah, sorry, lads, I screwed this? Because it's a mess. It was a mess at the start, and we predicted it was going to be a mess, and it's turned out to be somehow even more of a mess than we thought it would, which is quite some achievement. So in many regards, you have to applaud Nathan Jones for making it even more of a mess than everyone thought it might be. But yeah, an absolute shambles. Calling out anyone and everyone. Nothing to do with him, obviously, because that would be presumably sort of goes against his ethos. Just shambles. And I mean, let's be fair. The players have to take a portion of responsibility. They've not been good enough. And for a large part, this is kind of the same group of players, but with added better players, theoretically, that we've digested the players that we've signed, and we've all thought, okay, there's a process involved in signing these players, and they've all got attributes that we think, okay, they can fit a hole, they can replace someone who we thought wasn't quite good enough in a certain position, and things like that. And yet every single one of those players is now bottom of the league, looking fairly hopeless. And yeah, they've got to stick their hands up and say, yeah, we've not been good enough either. The style and the tactics that are being given from the coaching staff, whether it's too detailed or not detailed enough, I mean, none of us will know. That's a behind closed doors thing, and unless someone breaks ranks and kind of decides that Jacob's going to be their best friend for the next week and tells us exactly how this is all falling down, we're probably never going to know. But one way or the other, the message isn't getting through to the players, and ultimately the manager is the one that's going to carry the can for that.
I have to say, we've got a record number of people watching along live. If you're on the Sunday night stream, temperatures and anger, I guess, are going to be high. Emotions are going to be sky high. I was mixed yesterday, Glenn, because to start off with, I was obviously angry with some of the stuff that he was coming out with, and as a fan, he's going to relegate the club that I've loved for so long. But then I started to think, is this a man just having a breakdown and acting out in public? Because the kind of stuff that he was coming out with is just not what you talk about in a press conference.
You got to be careful these days that you don't pile in too much on people when they're very low. But he's always been like this, as far as I can work out. He's always been like this back to his days at Luton and at Stoke. He was always very confrontational. You know, when we were all reading up about him, because let's face it, no one really knew anything about him when he joined the club, and the things you read in the you know, from people who know what they're talking about, all sort of said the same sort of things about him, that he didn't really take responsibility when things went wrong, and that it was always someone else's fault. What I've found staggering with the interviews after the game were the contradictions. Basically blamed everybody, you know, players, coaches, owners. They all seemed to go under the bus a little bit. Then he blamed himself briefly for listening to the others, but the main problem seemed to be with the other people. And then he said he hadn't listened to anybody. So what is it? You know, what is he on about there? The most worrying sort of thing that he said was this: I'm not going to compromise anymore. I'm going to play the way I want to play, which is Nottingham Forest at home. So you can expect, you know, Tall Paul and Shea up front, and the ball being launched from Ainsley Maitland-Niles in midfield. So it's yeah, that's worrying. Which is, you know, I mean, I said after the Forest game, 100% we're going down with him in charge. And you pick up when you say something like that after 3 games, whatever it was, you pick up a certain amount of flack for it, and that's fine. But it gives me no pleasure to say I was right, and I still feel I was 100% right in saying that. And I don't really see anything to sort of change my mind. And also, I did wonder, you know, we contemplated on here, what brought the change from that Forest performance to Manchester City a week later, where we played great football and played them off the park. I think we suspected at the time that someone else had been involved, be it another coach or the players had said, we're not playing like this. So maybe he was alluding to that. Maybe it explains that a little bit. But he was obviously quite happy to roll with it while we beat Palace and beat Man City and beat Everton. And now all of a sudden, that, you know, that's a problem. And the other thing, I just found it embarrassing. I kind of, you know, switched off what I was watching at the end of the game because I couldn't be bothered with it anymore. And then sort of tuned in to social media at about 7 o'clock, and you see all this stuff that's come out, from Jacob and Alfie and whatever that guy's name was, Paul Belvers or whatever. And it's just like crushingly embarrassing. We're bottom of the league anyway. And then you get something else that comes along after the game to give you another well-placed kick in the nuts that you really, you really don't want or need at that stage. You'd be better off just shutting up, saying he's ill or something, and not going to the press conference.
Putting someone else out.
It's just awful. And I'm to be honest, I know what Steve was saying there about Rasmus has got to admit his mistake, but I just think it's gone beyond that now. I don't see how you possibly have a choice at this stage, but here we are. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
And Jacob, are there any clues as to what the compromises might be? I mean, is Glen right? And the way we set up against Forest and the way we played was how he's going to play, and that might be a clue for the next 17 games, and we're just going to have to like it. And I know he said after the Forest game he wasn't wholly unhappy with what he saw. So do you think that might be the way forward for him? It makes me cringe saying it, but and who are these influences? Who has been picking this team then and in his ear the last couple of weeks?
I think so. I think the playing with he always keeps talking about the reason why he's brought in is to continue Ralph Hasenhüttl's strengths, so vertical, direct, be aggressive, be on the front foot, but also go back to basics. And I think he probably feels in himself that he's kind of lost that. He's tried to add too many things on. He keeps changing formations a lot. I think his ideal formation, everyone really knows, is 3-5-2. And the way they play 3-5-2 is to go long, win the second balls, get it out wide, cross the ball. It's pretty basic stuff, but it's really effective in the Championship. It can be effective in the Premier League, depending if all the players buy into it. But at the moment, there seems to be a discord between what Jones wants and what the rest of the club wants. And that's quite staggering, considering that the reason why he was brought in because of all these metrics and stuff like that. There's a lot of really good people working at the club who are really progressive, who want Southampton to be better, to be one of the more progressive, advanced teams in terms of playing style. You saw it with Ralph in terms of out of possession, especially when it's good. And they look and they're feeling quite dispirited at the moment because they're seeing all the good work they're doing in the academy. They've been told to play a certain way, high press, keep the ball, be brave on the ball. And when they get to the first team, they see a man that's wanting to go back to basics. He says he doesn't go direct, but the stats, especially against Nottingham Forest, certainly tell you he is going direct. And he's bringing in all these players that he wants experience. He keeps talking about height, and he's brought back Jan Bednarek. And I think Jan Bednarek, even though he wants to be, he wants to say sorry, and I think he's made quite a good effort to do that, in fairness, since he's come back. He symbolises the
without
issues.
Without saying the word.
Yeah, exactly. He symbolises the issues at Southampton in terms of Jones wants to go back. He's not looking forward, and he's not building on the good work from the academy. And I think there's a real issue there. And I think staff are feeling quite dispirited about that. Not only in the academy but in the first team as well. And just to go back to your point finally, Martin, about who's influencing it. Obviously, that's only Jones knows that. But of course, Rasmus Ankersen has got a big football background. He used to be a player. He used to be a coach. He used to be a chairman. He will be the man that ultimately decides if he sacks a manager or hires a manager. So, and after every game, them two do debrief as well. So I think he could possibly be one of those influences.
Just to quickly, Jacob, on we're talking about the Jones being very different to the rest of the club. Yeah. What was that phrase? The alignment of departments, or whatever that rubbish was that they came out with. We've signed players this transfer window, namely Orsic, Sulemana, who do not fit the 3-5-2 formation that Jones wants to play. I mean, you've seen the way Orsic has been treated this week. Go and play in the B team with the kids. It's outrageous. And Theo Walcott gets a game. So, that's another reason why I cannot see why Rasmus, if it's going to be him, is putting up with that, because he's saying, here's this, third place in the World Cup, top level winger with loads of goals and assists to his name, albeit in the Croatian league. But what are you going to do with him? You're going to play him at wing back. And that's what kind
Don't give him ideas.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he's had the idea already.
Yeah.
I mean, and Sulemana doesn't look like the sort of winger that's going to play wing back either.
I think that's the jumble thinking, isn't it, Glenn? You see Suleiman. I think ideally Jones probably wants to play him inside a little bit more, a bit closer to Big Paul. But then, Orsic is probably got a signing that makes sense. Rasmus probably knows of him. He knows it's 4.5 million, low risk, and he gets goals. So on paper, it looks okay, regardless if Jones wants him. But every decision they made in January, they stress it to all the staff, the academy staff, the first team staff. What we do in January is all for survival. And with the signing of James Bree, for example, they thought, right, we're going to survive through playing Nathan Jones's ball. But then you bring in Suleiman, and like you say, Orsic, and some of these signings aren't Nathan Jones signings; they're club signings, and vice versa as well. So it's a bit of a jumble, and you're not quite sure of the strategy. And I think if we're not quite sure of the strategy, I don't think the staff inside the club who've been told all these things are as well.
I know you picked up on this on Friday, Glenn. Do you think the problem started on Friday when that B team lineup was announced, and you had Saleta Sarr, who was playing on Friday? So then you instantly think, well, that's going to be Lianco and Bednarek are going to be starting at the weekend. Obviously, you mentioned Orsic, who put that Instagram post of him sat at home reading a book, watching football on his laptop. And it just, I mean, if you're one of those players, as you say, they've been brought in to strengthen the team that are bottom of the league, and then they're asked to go and play for the B team on Friday.
Well, Nathan Jones, I would suggest, has got a personal issue with Chiletazar. There seems to be an issue there because I can't see a football reason as to why he's gone from being, in the eyes of most people, our best central defender to now being fifth choice, which is where he seems to have gone. Well, probably will be when Bella-Kotchap's up to full fitness. So there's an issue there. I have heard from somewhere else that Chiletazar is the sort to speak up if he's not terribly happy about something. So maybe something's been said there. I think Steve made the point during the week that maybe he's been scapegoated for the red card against Newcastle. Who knows?
I mean, I'd rather he took the red card than us be 2-0 down for the away leg. I think that was a take one for the team booking, and actually that was the sign of a player that is playing for the team. He knew that if he didn't bring the guy down, Sam Maximan is clean through, is probably going to make it 2-0 and the tie's over. Him getting the second booking means that at least we had a chance until obviously the lineup dropped at St James's Park on Tuesday night.
It bought us an extra 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So so the B team lineup was mind blowing, wasn't it? I mean, it was just like, what's going on there? Why is Bednarek gone from out on loan at Aston Villa and not playing at all to being the first choice centre back alongside Salisu? Is Jones just being edgy and just trying to say, look, I've brought this guy back. No one else wanted him. I'm going to prove you're wrong. So there. I have no idea. There's so many things that happened with the selection of the B team and the selection of the first team against Brentford that I don't understand. I've mentioned it already. Walcott who's done nothing whatsoever for 2 years, playing ahead of the guy you've just signed.
I mean, to be fair to Walcott, he actually played quite well.
He did actually, yeah. Adam Armstrong,
it was just odd.
Adam Armstrong's still getting minutes.
There's a certain amount of showing your cards to the opposition as well, isn't there? You're giving away who's going to be starting at the back on a Friday afternoon, whatever difference that makes.
I bet Ivan Toney was delighted when he saw Chiletazar wasn't playing.
Yeah. Steve, the other thing is, of course, there's going to be a fans forum that's scheduled in for Tuesday, but we're not expecting to get too much out of that. In fact, it's quite telling that the manager's not going to be there, and they made that decision before the weekend. There's a certain amount of maybe keeping him away from a microphone, because that's how it feels to me.
I mean, it's one of those of who is the coward here. Is it Nathan Jones for not wanting to face the fans himself, or is it the club for not wanting to put in front of 100? I think it's limited to 100.
Probably not know the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, clearly they're never going to answer that question. But that's kind of the pondering that immediately sprung to mind when they announced the lineup. And yeah, you just think, well, I mean, if the manager's not going to be there, what's the point? I mean, who are they going to pick? I mean, from what I gather, Radio Solent aren't even going to be there. So it's not a Radio Solent driven forum, so it's not going to be broadcast live. So who's comparing? Who's asking the questions? Who's vetting the questions? Who's vetting the people that are there? Are they basically picking a load of season ticket holders who answered that fan survey back in, Christ, whenever it was they did the last first survey? I can't even remember when that was. But are they basically picking people from there who were very kind to the club, said, "Oh yeah, everything's great. I want to come along and tell Rasmus Ankersen how brilliant everything is going."
I said I wasn't
they
interested.
actually going to let people in?
I said I wasn't interested in an artisan burger. Was it that one?
What about the light show though, Glenn? That's going to be
okay.
on the agenda.
Yeah. I got a history of epilepsy, so
we're relying on somebody being there and perhaps giving us a running commentary on Twitter, aren't we? On
I hope
Tuesday
there's going to be
night.
like somebody sat in the audience, like Facebook Live feed of it or something, because as far as from what I've seen, the club aren't going to be broadcasting it. So
no.
It's a shame that
what's the point?
It's a shame that Adam Blackmore's not doing it, because I don't know if you saw his tweets that he did today.
Yeah,
they were actually pretty good. So I didn't mean to say that they're not normally, but he was getting he was getting stuck in. He was getting stuck in. He wasn't towing the party line.
And he thought about it last night, wasn't he? I think he'd waited until today and then sort of composed his thoughts. And there was a lot that struck a chord with a lot of people.
It's a shame that he's not doing it. Mind you, maybe it's because he's not doing it that he felt he was able to stick those tweets out there. But
you're not going to be sneaking in with a fake moustache and glasses, are you, Jacob? Sat at the back.
I'm supposed to be having a week off next week, so
I
don't think that's happening. Honestly,
no chance.
Right, let's get on and talk about some football. Unfortunately,
do we have
to? Yeah. Well, I did think maybe we could just talk about Happy Valley for an hour, just do something a little bit different for tonight rather than talk about football. But it was another defeat, the 14th Premier League defeat of the season on Saturday. A comfortable 3-0 win for Brentford. Glenn, I know the answer to this, but the same result was back in May, so that's got to be proof that we've not progressed at all since last May, surely.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's 2 games 9 months apart, so you can't really sort of use that to sort of build up a big picture. But yeah, it's interesting that everyone knew the significance of the game last year in terms of the crowd sort of turning on Ralph, and we've gone there today. Yesterday we played a very good side, and it seemed to me like we were just about hanging in there in the first half for the first 40 minutes. 2 goals in a minute. The game is completely dead, isn't it? And I thought there was one exceptional performer for us at the back for most of the game. Salisu, I thought he was excellent. He prevented 2 certain goals in the first half. Prevented another one in the second half when it was already 2-0, I think. He'll probably feel he maybe should have done better with Ben Mee's goal, but that was a hell of a header. But the problem was we didn't stop the crosses coming in, and James Bree had a difficult introduction to the Premier League there, because 2 crosses came from his wing and one got floated over his head for the second goal. So yeah, it wasn't great. 2-0 down at half time. Made the changes, brought on Torpal and Sulemana, and it was a little bit better in the second half. But like the Newcastle away game, we're out of the game by then. So the other team are just sitting back a little bit and just seeing how the game plays out. Yeah, we had more possession and we had a couple of sort of half chances, but never ever expected us to even get 1 goal, let alone get back into it by scoring a couple. So and the third goal was the icing on the cake, and it was the normal thing, wasn't it? The cross into the mixer, and our guys are all stood. One's not stopping the cross, and 3 are all stood there. And there's a free guy to head it into the net. So it was a disaster, but knew it was going to be a disaster virtually as soon as we saw the B team line up the day before.
Yeah, stems back to that Friday again. Jacob, I know you picked up on the problem with the crosses into the box. They just don't seem to be learning.
No, I think that Southampton don't do either is solve problems themselves. I remember picking up on this when I was watching them during lockdown, like how vocal Ralph Hasenhüttl was compared to the rest of the team. There's no real vocal presence. There's no leader in there. And if there is a shout, there's no tactical advice in there. There's no one saying, right, for example, Jack Stevens saying, right, Kyle, just make sure you tuck in a bit closer to me because we keep getting done down the right-sided channel. There was none of that, and I don't think there is any now. Southampton, especially under Jones as well, because he keeps saying that he wants to be solid, defensively sound. They conceded a lot of counter-attacks, and I think it's because, one, Southampton don't keep the ball well enough to actually organise themselves first, and two, they're just not positionally in a good position anyway. So there's no structure in the team, there's no organisation, and when things do start to go wrong, which they do in every Premier League game at the moment, they haven't scored first in any of them. There's no one to rectify them until half time. I think you saw that at Newcastle. They were completely blown away in 25 minutes, and an injury to Joe Linton allowed Jones to call him over, and they changed back to a back four and actually got a little bit better. It just feels like we see the problems in the first 5 minutes, and that sets a tone. Crosses into the box, overlaps. You know how Brentford play. They're probably how Southampton want to play eventually, but Southampton couldn't deal with it. And the fact is, Southampton conceded 10 goals from crosses now. They get broken on a lot of times, and they seem to be going back to how Ralph was, just without the press as well.
We're all starting to sound like broken records, aren't we, Steve? But it's just the same old story again, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, Jacob did put a graphic out on Twitter. Was it this morning or was it last night? Showing all the first half crosses, and basically the two that were headed away from. I think there were two that were prevented from getting into the area, and then there were two that were literally in the first 2 minutes from corners from either side, headed away by the first man. You thought, well, if they're putting corners across like that for the entire 90 minutes, that's fine. We can deal with that and head those away till the cows come home. But of course, Premier League players are better than that, and eventually they'll learn and they'll adjust. And the crosses did get better into the area, and we're just not good enough at stopping them. And I mean, this is something I'm so bored of discussing this, because we bring it up every week.
We all are.
that like the years where we were good defensively under Pochettino, Koeman, and even Puel, when we weren't quite as attacking as we needed to be towards the end of his year in charge. But certainly to start with, defensively, we were really solid. And that was because we didn't let the ball get into the area. If you don't let the ball get into the area, then at the end of the day, the opposition are relying on taking a pot shot from 30 yards and pinging it into the top corner. At the end of the day, if someone scores that way, you stick your hands up and give them a handshake and say, yeah, fair play to you. But we've not. I mean, we pack our team with defensive midfielders, and yet the defensive midfielders aren't doing the job of a defensive midfielder of helping out the defence. They give a little bit of protection to the centre-backs when the opposition are running at us. But when the ball goes wide, they need to be shuffling across and giving the fullback help, because clearly whoever's playing at fullback, and to be honest, it doesn't really matter who it's been over the last 3 or 4 years. Whoever's been playing at fullback hasn't been good enough on their own to stop a winger, or a combination of a winger and an opposing fullback from working an angle and putting a cross into our box. And we can see not even just so many goals, but so many clear chances, so many chances that we get away with a lot of the time. But this season we're getting found out because we're giving away good quality chances, and the opposition are just better at taking them than they have been previously. And it's just not good enough. And I mean, the fact that I'm sat here with, my coaching qualification is basically the most entry level qualification you can get, like the FA Junior level 1 or whatever it is these days. I can't remember what it's called. That's how long ago I got it. Same
as one of Nathan Jones's assistants, then, isn't it?
Quite possibly, yeah. But the fact that even I can see this as a basic problem at a top level league, surely they analyse this and spot that crosses into the box are a problem. Actually defending the cross itself by being able to win headers and stuff isn't the issue. It's letting the ball get into the box in the first place. And it's like, well, okay, you want to play a zonal marking system. That was basically what caused the goal, the first goal. Ben Mee's goal is because Mee has sprinted across the defensive line. He's got the momentum from his run and is able to put power on his header and basically outmuscle Salisu, and I think I can't remember who else it was that jumped with him. But basically everybody ends up in a crumpled heap. Mee's the guy that wins the header. And it's a great run, it's a great header. But if you're marking zonal, that's kind of the risk that you run, in that your defenders are static. If you don't have a run at the ball, you can only ever be reactive. And I think in the situation where too many balls are coming into the box, you've got to be a little bit more proactive than that. And I think if you're allowing the ball to come into the box, we need to be marking man to man. Whereas that zonal marking system kind of works if you've got midfield help to prevent the ball coming into the box in the first place.
Is it, Glenn, more to do with the inconsistencies in the lineup? You look at the most successful teams over years, they know they're going to play with a back four or they're going to play with a back five, and they're going to have the same personnel week in, week out. We've got someone like Roman Perot that puts in a really good performance against Blackpool, scores a couple of goals, and then he's not on the team sheet. Then you've got the new lad, Bree, coming in at right back and struggling because he was chucked in at the deep end. There's no chance for them to build relationships there and get to know each other, and surely that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you know, to me, you pick your best two central defenders. Hopefully, one's left-footed, one's right-footed, which we have the opportunity to do, if we so wish. And you pick your best two natural fullbacks on each side, and you go with that, and you don't change it. You know, you drill those players to play as a back four. I mean, everyone can probably name the back four that Arsenal had in 1990 because it was so good. You know, it's that sort of thing. I mean, I think we're going to go on to the Newcastle game, but if you look at that Newcastle game, the manager has picked a back five for starters. It's 5 players who have never played together before. It includes a player who's never played higher than the Championship in his first game at this level, away at St James's Park in the semi-final. It includes a player who's been on loan at Aston Villa and not started a game, and it includes a right back playing left back. And you wonder why it's a shambles. You know, it's not rocket science, and in that particular case, because a midfielder lost a runner, he kind of absolved himself from all blame for picking that back five and just said, "Oh well, if we hadn't lost a runner, it wouldn't have been a goal." That's as maybe, but you know, we had 5 defenders all feeling their way into the game, and you know, I've been accused of being a bit hard on James Bree. I don't think he covered himself in glory yesterday, but he
was okay. I thought
he was horribly thrown into that game against Newcastle. You know, on the back of probably 2 training sessions with teammates he'd never met before, and he was thrown into that game, and there was absolutely no need to do it. Bearing in mind Walker-Peters and Perot were available, and he could have picked a familiar back four or even a back five. He could have done that, but he didn't do it. So, in answer to your question, yeah, I think it's ridiculous to change the defence every single week and expect it to be a well-oiled machine. It just isn't going to be.
Just a word, Jacob, on the new additions that made their debuts yesterday. Tough ask for them coming on at halftime when the game's lost. Is there some things there, some signs of encouragement, some stuff we can get excited about?
Yeah, I think so. It's just that's what's so frustrating because Samson, I think, have fought really well. I do think that. I think, you know, what, they've signed 15 players overall, you know, in the last 2 windows, showed good ambition. I thought deadline day was quite successful. They were really quite efficient. They worked through the list of targets, eventually got big pull in. And Sulemana, everyone seems to want, because although he scored 4 goals in 2 years, every recruitment guy you speak to from any Premier League team says the metrics. I know you don't like that word, Glenn, but they suggest that he is going to be
Glenn's a more imperial guy.
They suggest that he is going to be a really, really good player. So I think Samson brought quite a coup there, and you'd like to think that the more training time. I think they came in Friday afternoon, so they had no training.
I was going to say, did they even have a session?
No, they didn't, and it was a bit of a risk really to play in 45 minutes. But I think Sulemana looked bright. He looked like he wanted to get the ball, to feet. He was positive, had that one shot that Raya comfortably saved. Big Paul looked a bit awkward, to be honest with you. I don't think Samson have quite worked out that he's 6'7", so and that's an issue. He's not going to be the best presser either, so that kind of probably influences how Jones is going to play from there on in. But
I'll tell you what, it amazes me. You've got a 6'7" centre forward, and you can't cross the ball in his general direction, because 2 crosses went behind him, and other crosses was skidding along the ground about 2 foot up. You know, it's like, how difficult can it be to pick out a guy who is that big?
Exactly. But I think Slams have signed well, and they just need to hit the ground running, don't they? But it would help if Nathan Jones probably used more than just James Bree from the 5 signings they signed in the window.
Yeah. Well, you know that if they don't have a good game at the weekend, they'll find themselves turning out for the B team in Totton. So that motivation, I think, for the weekend. Need to talk about the Newcastle game as well. Just a quick one on this. We were never going to be favourites going into that game, certainly after the first leg. And sure enough, we made it impossible for ourselves. Glenn, was that completely lost in that first 20 minutes of madness in that team lineup?
It's lost in the first 5 minutes. You know, once
an hour before kickoff, wasn't it?
Yeah, hour before kickoff. And once we let in the goal after 4 minutes, we were dead. There was no way we were going to score 3 goals. Up there, bear in mind they hadn't let in a goal for about 2 years or whatever.
Can I ping my neon lights for Sean Longstaff? Because
yeah.
Our defence should have probably listened.
Yeah. We all said he was rubbish last week. Well, I said he was rubbish last week. I'll take full responsibility for that.
I stand by it.
But
I regret nothing.
I maintain that if you leave a player unmarked in the middle of your penalty area, it doesn't matter how bad he is, he will find a net, unless it's Adam Armstrong, of course.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, we got back to 2-1. He had that chance to make it 2-2, which might have made it a little bit squeaky for Newcastle. But once that's missed, even the red card, we didn't really do much in the second half. Newcastle sat off and just managed the game, didn't they? Really, and
complaining about that red card was quite something, by the way.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, almost peak Eddie Howe there, really.
Yeah. I was hoping they'd appeal it because then he'd get an extra game ban, and then he would miss the final. But no, we 20 minutes the game was absolutely over, and I was torn with the idea of switching it off. And all I can say is well done to the people who made the trip and went up there, because
you could hear them.
Absolutely. I mean, when you go, you don't go and follow Saints away from home and have your happiness decreed by the result. So even when you go to have a good time, don't you? So if you're 2-0 down, or in effect 3-0 down after 20 minutes, to keep going and enjoy yourself and keep making a load of noise, I thought was brilliant. And even though we were pretty average, even in the second half.
And Steve, some slick goals from Newcastle, but if you don't get the basics right, then if you're not tracking your runners and stopping the crosses, then they're there for the taking, aren't they?
I mean, those 2 goals in the first half were only slick because we allowed them to be slick. I mean, the first goal, I think we surrendered possession 3 times in the space of 5 seconds, which was quite something. And then to give any Premier League player, whether they're the weak link in Newcastle's team or not, give them the freedom of the penalty area. I mean, Jan Bednarek, who's supposedly Big Yanni B, who Nathan wants back in the team, and has basically turned his back on it from 6 yards out.
Yeah,
he's not bothered trying to close the guy down. It's like, that's fine. I'll make myself as small as possible, give the keeper no chance whatsoever. Cheers for that, Jan. Well done. And the second one, it's quite well worked, but again, we've let a runner run completely unchallenged into the penalty area, and he's got effectively a tap in. It's just basics, absolute basics, and we just continually gave the ball away in terrible areas in that first 25 minutes. And actually, Joe Linton getting injured was the only reason we showed any sort of life in that first half, because it allowed us to have a bit of a discussion over on the touchline, change the formation, went to 4 at the back, and all of a sudden, oh look, we look like a functioning football team again. Who'd have seen that coming?
Yeah.
Great goal by Che, to be fair to him. He can't score from about 8 yards out, but from 28, finds the corner. Great strike.
A mate of mine said it's because he wasn't in the final third. So as he gets into the final third, he's like the jigsaw.
When you can see the keeper's eyes. It's just a shot out of frustration, wasn't
Another
it?
2 yards further forward and it would have gone sideways or straight at the goalkeeper. But
it did feel a bit, sod it, I might as well just hit this.
Yeah.
No,
it was a great goal.
That was great finish. And it's the sort of goal that everybody's sort of looking at and thinking, why the hell don't you do that more often? Try shooting from distance. We don't do it. Prowse is basically the only guy who's confident enough to take shots on from distance. And surprisingly enough, he's the only guy that ever scores from distance for us. I think there's a correlation there.
Jacob, you were there. What was the atmosphere like? Can we pin it all on that lineup, that team announcement, or did the occasion get the better? I can imagine when the place is rocking just before kickoff, it's probably quite daunting. And Alcaraz, for example, look, great signing in the first leg, but then he was all over the place for the second game. Do you think a few of them maybe just let the occasion get to them a bit?
Maybe so. The atmosphere was phenomenal before kickoff. To be honest with you, the flags, the noise, it was great. But everyone could tell you the first 20 minutes you've just got to weather the storm, because as good as Newcastle fans are, they will eventually quiet down, and they don't need any encouragement. They don't need any encouragement.
It's an absolute myth that Newcastle fans are any good.
Steve, they were the loudest.
It was 10 minutes.
Still, in that 10 minutes, they still scored a goal. So what Southampton needed to do, they needed just to take the steam out of the game. They need to calm it down, and eventually, if you think that, Steve, they'll quiet down completely. But it didn't help that ultimately Jones went to a back five, and both of the goals, Trippier was the spare man every time, because everyone knows if you play a back five, you're susceptible to switches of play. You can get overloaded down both wings. Both goals come from the left with Longstaff, the third man runner, and they're basically carbon copies. And exactly the same happened against Brentford. The back five only works if the midfield shuffle across and cover with the wing backs. They didn't do that. Alcaraz, like you say, Martin, he looked lost in there. I was only 20 yards away from the pitch, so you could see him, and obviously he doesn't speak a word of English, so it did feel like it was a little bit awkward for him, messy. Ward-Prowse was getting shifted. He was the one that kept going over to Nathan Jones, asking him, "Where do you want me?" He played number 10, played to the right side, played in a double pivot. He seems to be going everywhere, and Jones, when he looks lost, Chris Cohen, who normally sits next to the analyst for the first 20 minutes, is beckoned down to come and talk to him about any tactical changes he might see. And I think obviously a back four was better, but I couldn't believe how dysfunctional they looked in the back five, because although it's out of possession as well, they looked awful. I remember Kyle Walker-Peters got the ball and there was no one outside of him or no one further forward, so he just had to come back. It looked like they just went to a back five and had done no preparation towards it, and it just felt like such an opportunity missed.
Yeah, it's a shame, real shame. But back to the league again, and this weekend it's Wolves, another must-win game, biggest game of the season. 17 games left, 3 points from safety. So again, not cut adrift. But Glen, we played Wolves back in September. A game probably most memorable for Che Adams, missing that one. One of the simplest chances you'll probably ever see. So they've changed their manager. They've had mixed fortunes, but they seem to be managing to cobble a couple of results together. So it's going to be another tough one on Saturday.
Yeah, well, they were a point behind us when they changed their manager, and we changed at the same time, and they're now 5 or 6 ahead of us, I think. And they just stuffed Liverpool 3-0. I know Liverpool are not what they were in the previous couple of seasons, but I wouldn't bank on us to beat Liverpool at home right now. So yeah, well, I'm kind of looking at this one quite optimistically, because I'm hoping he's going to get sacked tomorrow and someone else is in charge. I'd put Ruben Sellers in charge for the rest of the season, to be honest, and because he can't do worse. If that doesn't happen, and Jones is in charge, well, at the moment I can't see us getting 25 points, let alone 25, 30 points, let alone the 35 or 6 or whatever that you're going to need to stay up. I watched a bit of the Wolves Liverpool game, and of course, Wolves have got Mario Lemina playing.
Yeah.
And apparently he was brilliant for them.
Yeah, apparently he looked really, really good.
Well, he had a good World Cup as well, didn't he? To be fair.
They've had a good... No, he didn't play. He didn't go to the World Cup. You got the wrong country there, mate.
Go on.
So, and they made a good signing in Craig Dawson in the centre of defence, because that takes out Collins, who I always thought was a bit of a liability for them. So they look a decent side. They've got a couple of new strikers as well. Sarabia looks dangerous. So suddenly they've addressed their weak points and they look like a good side. So I think this is a hell of a lot tougher game than it was when we played them at Molineux earlier on. And to me, they look, if Jones is going to carry out his promise/threat to be to go back to the basic football, Craig Dawson and whoever their other centre half is, whose name escapes me. They're just gonna lap that up. Kilman's about 7 foot tall, isn't he? So it'll be an interesting battle between him and tall Paul, who I'm sure will play. And Yeah, I'm not looking forward to it very much at all.
It is all going to be eyes on that lineup again, Steve. If he is still in charge by the weekend, and there's nothing to suggest that he won't be, he's promised some changes. He said that the stuff this week about I'm not seeing myself in the team, and he's going to stop listening to these outside influences.
Well, he's 50 years old. I hope he wasn't in the team. That's
These outside influences that he's not listening to.
Yeah, it's
what's
odd,
this,
isn't it?
his wife's family, the Saints supporting side of his family. Are they chirping in with suggestions or what?
I just
don't know.
wonder what changes we can expect to see that he hasn't managed to get across in the last couple of months.
Try and sneak an extra man onto the pitch. I mean, worth a go. I mean, the refereeing at this level, they might not notice. I don't see how he possibly goes into that game at home and has anything other than basically abuse from minute one. I just don't see it. The way that he's conducted himself in the last 24 hours, I struggle to see how his position is tenable in any way, shape, or form. And it kind of feels like, yeah, okay, he might be. I mean, is he still? Are we really actually genuinely going to keep him in charge till Saturday? That's a genuine question. Are we actually that stupid as a football club? Is that where we're going to go? We're actually going to keep this guy who's clearly proven himself a little bit unhinged but most importantly, clearly not up to the job in charge when we've got 17 games and we need to get, let's face it, at least 20 points.
Yeah.
It kind of feels almost futile, sort of speculating how he might approach it. I mean, you might as well literally draw the team out of a tombola. The way he's been doing it anyway. Yeah, it's mental. I mean, clearly, Chileta Sarr isn't going to play because he hates him. Presumably because he stood up to him and he said, "No, this is nonsense. What are you doing?" And Jones says, "Well, you don't undermine me like that," which would be fine if we were getting results. If you can take that sort of hard line of man management against dissenting voices, if you're able to back that up with anything. But Jones has literally nothing to back it up with. There's no sense of a plan. There's no sense of any structure. He's even. That press conference, he effectively admitted that the last 3 months have been a waste of everybody's time. He had 5 weeks after that Liverpool game, between the Liverpool game and the Lincoln game, where 40% of that period, he told the players to go on holiday.
Mm.
So he's not been working with the players the whole time that he claims he's been working with the players. He told them to go on holiday for 2 weeks when actually, I mean, come on, lads, we're in the bottom 3. This is the time where you've got to be working. We're still during the season. In any other season, you would still be playing games. Why are we? I appreciate that there is a huge hypocrisy here, but why are we letting players jet off to Dubai for 3 weeks in the winter? I mean, come on, guys. I mean, yes, I know I'm here now, but I'm not a football player on 40 grand a week with a job to do. It's mental, and like the guys lost the plot, and it literally doesn't matter what it feels as if it doesn't matter what team or system he puts out on Saturday. It's got no hope of doing anything. And that comes, and obviously that also, you also come across the fact that Wolves have clearly improved under a proper manager with a bit of pedigree.
So I think the first maybe 10, 15 minutes are going to be so key on Saturday, Jacob, because the atmosphere is going to turn pretty damn quickly. If not, all eyes are going to be on that team sheet at 2:00. And then that will probably set the tone for the afternoon, whether it be him or somebody else. So what would you like to see? What do we need to see from that on Saturday, just so we can get behind it?
I like Southampton to actually start fast, because apart from the Man City home game, which is a cup game, that they haven't done that under Jones. They've looked tactically shambolic until they've made a change. And I think Jones, actually, to give him some credit, is he's actually not too bad at changing in game. I know everyone could say, well, if he got it right in the first place,
You wouldn't need
but
to. Yeah.
he at least he does rectify problems, and he does usually generate a sense of improvement. So that's okay.
It's usually the same problem, though.
But
I mean, if he's a problem solver, then I mean, there's a letter he could be writing right about now.
yeah, but in terms of the team lineup, you don't really know. You see the team and you try and work out. Like me and Adam Blackmore were sat there as a team news broke, and we were thinking, and everyone's like, right, it's a 4-2-3-1. And I went, yeah, but hold on, what if Elianussi's right wing back?
Yeah.
And Adam was like scribbling frantically, and he was not sure what formation, and it's bizarre, really. And it's just come to show that how different it is compared to Arsenal when he would play the same formation and basically the same team. So Southampton need to start fast, and if they don't, then things are going to get toxic. And Southampton fans, they are patient. Compared to a lot of other Premier League teams, they stick by their team. They are patient. They gave Ralph 3.5 years because he had lots of credit in the bank. He managed to immerse himself in the community, into the fan base. They worked, and Southampton looked like they actually knew what they were doing, and they're exciting. And fans aren't stupid, so let's not play them for fools. They're not seeing any sense of progress at the moment on the pitch. So seeing some sort of progress on that pitch in the first 15 minutes is going to be crucial. Otherwise, things are going to turn toxic, and those same songs that were sung against Brentford will be sung again.
It doesn't bear thinking about, really.
And worse, I imagine.
And worse, yeah, and worse. Glenn, I'm going to come to you first for a score prediction because I think you're currently leading the way.
Am I?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think most of us picked up a point yesterday. So, score prediction for the Wolves game, please.
He's going to be in charge, isn't he? 2-0 defeat.
Okay. Steve, what would you like to chip in with for this?
Oh God! I mean, if by some ridiculous, I mean, I don't know whether Ankerson has just gone to sleep for the week, maybe.
New manager bounce.
Well, if Jones is still in charge, we're getting beat. There's absolutely no question about it. 3-0. I mean, Lamina will score, won't he?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Just to really rub it in Glen's face. A
worldie.
Yeah. I mean, if we bin him off, and I mean, even if Sellers is in charge or whoever, then maybe we might get away with a draw. But I just don't see how this team wins a game at the moment.
Okay, so there's two parts to your prediction there. You're predicting that A, he'll still be in charge, and B, we're probably going to lose 3-0.
Yes, it's a positive one this week.
Are you sticking with the positivity and predicting wins? Because it's not working out good so far, is it?
No, I think it's broken me now. I think
we all get there, mate.
We've dragged it down to our level.
I'm going to completely change tack and hoping that I'm wrong, but I'm going to go for a 3-1 Wolves win.
One right. We'll score.
We're going to score a goal. All right, okay.
Obviously.
There was some positivity as well this week, Steve, because the women's team won today, which was great.
Get in.
Yep, 2-0 win against Palace. Back on winning ways after slightly iffy return after the winter break. But yeah, 2-0 win over Palace, Palace themselves have kind of fallen off a cliff after a good start. But third in the table, I think 4 points behind the leaders. But as with last season, there's only one team go up. So it's the
lottery.
It's just a bit of a shambles, really. It doesn't really give enough teams enough to play for late in the season, unfortunately. But if we can keep in touch, we've got the leaders, London City Lionesses, still to play at home. We got a draw away at their place at Dartford before Christmas, so who knows? Still with a chance, but I mean, I've seen a couple of clips from Super League games over the weekend, and just the pace of the game at that level is just a world away from what they're playing in the Championship. So it's going to be, I mean, if they do pull it off and get promoted, it's going to be one hell of a baptism. I think they're going to need to change quickly. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Quite a leap. Nice one. Thank you, chaps. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching along live. Thank you for getting involved. Don't forget you can follow the Total Saints podcast on Facebook and on Twitter. We're at Total Saints Pod. The website is totalsaints.co.uk. There's a link on there to the online shop, which we call Total Saints Icons. And you can also drop us an email during the week, and you can leave us a review as well if you like to. We're also on Patreon. I mentioned that at the start. That's where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. Head to patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast to find out more. There's 4 tiers on there. You can support us at different levels, ranging from £5 to £20 per month. Each comes, of course, with their own perks, including weekly shout-outs for those patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tier. So thanks, as always, for your support to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Matt Hall, who are in the Francis Benali tier, and also Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, and Nick Higston, as well as Phil Cook, Matt Rose, and Nick Reed, who are in the Mick Shannon tier. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Jacob. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next week.